usually.
I see. So you can pick a book up, but you wouldn't be allowed to write because the music of the words you're writing would probably interfere with your silence, wouldn't it?
Uh, yes, well, this is why it's such a liberal place. You are allowed to read and you are allowed to talk. Not in the retreat house, but when you walk along the road, you're allowed to seek spiritual counsel from the monks or just talk to a friend. So now I go there with my wife, and she and I stay in separate places, but we share meals together, talking quietly, and we share long walks at sunrise and sunset. And the big surprise for me, I think more than you, I love being by myself. I'm an only child. I spend my whole life at my desk. I'm not engaged in the real world the way you are. So when I got there, I thought, this is heaven. I can spend my whole day by myself. And as I started going there more often, I found actually the solitude is a gateway to community and compassion, because of course the monks are the opposite of solitary and silent. They're working around the clock to take care of one another and to take care of their visitors. They're cooking and raising vegetables and fixing the generator and taking care of accounts, and a very busy life, 24 hours a day for the rest of their lives. And when I stay with them, it's not heavenly at all. It's like being in an office in some ways. But when I walk along that road, if I meet a stranger and we exchange a couple of sentences, we can sense the silence from which their sentences come. In other words, the sentence I hear lives within me for a long time, as it wouldn't on the streets of Mumbai. And I can sense that the two sentences the stranger has exchanged are coming from the depths of her. And so the curious thing is that whoever I meet on that road, I trust, and I feel an instant kinship to. And sadly, that doesn't happen on the streets of New York City or even on the streets of Japan, because we're joined not by our jobs or where we happen to live or where we happen to go to college, but by the fact we've both been drawn to this silence and to whatever is inexpressible, as you said. So we're linked really by what's deepest in us and not just surface features or characteristics.
I am curious. I first discovered Pico I would argue a traveled writer. His first couple of books were about discovering other worlds. And then, if I look at his last half a dozen titles, I don't know if some of them are simply different editions of the same book, but you've got The Half-Known Life, you've got A Flame, Learning from Silence, you've got The Art of Stillness, Falling Off the Map, Abandon, The Man Within My Head. One can't get away from the thought that you are, in a sense, escaping from the world. Is that unfair?
I hope it's incomplete. It's not unfair. But I remember when I was a little boy, you might have had the same thought. I thought there were two things I need to do. One is to get to know the world. And both of us were born in the first generation when we could be in Tibet or Ethiopia or Bolivia tomorrow. And I wanted to make the most of that. And the second was, I need to get to know the self. As Mr. Sarkar was saying in his introduction, I need to know the person who's seeing the world and his delusions and projections and prejudices. So my last book, The Half-Known Life, was about North Korea and Iran and Kashmir and Sri Lanka, and mostly places of conflict and places of difficulty, the kind of places you're dealing with in the UN, because I need to know what's happening in the real world. And this sister book to it was about the monks who are living a life of absolute stillness. And so I'm always trying to do justice to both, keep myself moving around the world and root that movement in stillness, because I think the travel is only as rich as the stillness that underwrites it. But without both of them, I feel I would be not a complete human being.
So each complements the other.
Precisely.
Yeah, you can't
yes,
be accused
yes.
of abandoning the world, of
I hope not.
escaping reality. No, I mean, it's fascinating because you have, of course, written a lot about the world. Video Night in Kathmandu, Tropical Classical, The Global Soul, Sun After Dark, Flights into the Foreign, The Asiatics, Cuba and the Night. So all of these have been different ways of discovering different parts of the world, and Pico writes so uncommonly well. As you've heard, he speaks uncommonly well as well, so it's always a joy to read him. I haven't yet read him on stillness, I have to confess, and I'm very curious about that, but I thought you would whet my appetite for it, and you have. Thank you. But if I can turn you from that into something you briefly mentioned on side. You said that the 1990 fire taught you, in some ways, much about having a life with very little. I mean, you restarted life with a toothbrush and a bare floor to sleep on. Did you find yourself becoming more minimalist in your demands out of life as a result of that? Have you consciously eschewed material possessions, for example? Have you felt that you can get by with less, and is that therefore something you'd recommend to others? Or on the contrary, was it a moment of privation that you were only happy to overcome, and have you accumulated all the detritus of 21st century life, your mobile phones and laptops and iPads and cars and God knows what else, that are in some ways the accompaniments to the the simple process of being alive today?
Yes, and just before I answer that, thank you for reading me so thoughtfully and listening to me so sensitively. And I think you are probably guilty also of living in the world of stillness and movement, because your novels are works of imagination that clearly come from sitting still, and then so much of your nonfiction and your life as a politician is right in the real world. But yes, so after my book Aflame came out last month, I found myself giving readings in the heart of devastated Los Angeles to people who just lost everything in the world, as I did many years ago. And I heard myself saying that that particular evening, most of what I saw was the loss. And as the months and years went on, I saw indeed, as your question suggests, that it could be a liberation, and I could gain something. So when the insurance company came along and offered to replace my goods, I realized I didn't need 90% of the books and furniture and clothes I'd accumulated. Just as you say, I could live much more minimally as I'd always wanted to. And because I lost all those notes for my next 3 nonfiction books, I thought, I've got to write from memory and imagination and heart, which are actually much deeper places than the notes, as you know. And so I tried writing fiction, which I'm sure I would have been too scared to attempt otherwise. And lacking a physical home in California, I started moving towards Japan, which of course is the spiritual home of minimalism and freedom from clutter and the